The Telwynium is what you get when you cross old-school 16-bit graphics with the point-and-click stylings and mechanics that we've all come to know, love, and associate with our favorite adventure games. Developed and released by Powerhoof, each of the 3 currently available chapters, of which a 4th is supposedly slated for release later this year, were made in conjunction with various game jams. However, for the purposes of this video, I'll be treating all 3 chapters as if they're one and the same. They look the same, play the same, and all form a connecting narrative. The in-game interface doesn't even bother to differentiate between them, alright? I should also point out that the footage in this video will spoil certain parts of the story and gameplay. I tried to stay away from anything particularly major and will not touch on them in my commentary, but the shorter nature of these episodes means there's only so much footage to choose from. Out of context or not, if you think this might be a game that you'd like to play for yourself, I'd probably recommend clicking away. You take the role of various characters over the course of the story, though you primarily play as Pendar Calden, a simple sheep herder from the small village of Willowsdane. The story starts with Pendar and company, a ragtag bunch including his 2 friends Wit and Tawny, on the run after Willowsdane is ransacked by a group of demons known as the Shadowfell, stopping for a moment to rest for the night. As you might expect, everything goes to hell in a handbasket in record time, people start going missing, and it's up to you to try and pick up the pieces. Now, there is a lot, and I mean a lot, that I like about this game. So much so that I've effectively rewritten this script from scratch 3 times trying to figure out the best way to get it all across. Because in a lot of ways, this is a somewhat typical adventure game from the standpoint of its mechanics and gameplay. Played through a traditional point-and-click interface, you look about, talk with those around you, interact with the environment, and complete inventory object puzzles in order to proceed. Any fan of adventure games will be right at home in these digs. That's not a bad thing, mind you. I, for one, really enjoy the tried-and-true premise that it's built itself on. But it's not exactly breaking any new ground. It also means I have less to talk about. You know, the plight of being a YouTube reviewer is never ending. That's even more so the case because as a whole, what's on offer isn't that difficult. The puzzles are largely logic-based, and the game isn't shy about handing you a clue where it believes it's warranted. There's no way to get yourself killed as far as I could tell, nor lock yourself within an unwinnable situation. If you've seen any of my other videos about adventure games, I am a big fan of this type of structure. I despise moon logic with a passion and will make absolutely no apology for it. And even if you do find yourself stuck, a walkthrough for each chapter is included in the installation, a tidbit I'll touch on later. This might all seem a bit boring to the average adventure game aficionado, and I could see that. It's not tough as nails, where looking at something the wrong way is liable to force you to reload. But by presenting the gameplay in a more simplistic way, it allows the game to place its focus where it really thrives, the immersion. And believe it or not, a good deal of that immersion comes by means of its graphical presentation. I know, that's probably a little hard to fathom, but let me explain. No, these games were not made in the mid-90s. They make use of a graphical set popularized by Sierra Online for their later King's Quest titles which came out in that time frame. And I have been pretty tough on these types of graphics in the past, so recently as my last video about Hillsfar, mainly because the limited colors leads to a lack of definition and means that everyone looks like they've got scarlet fever, being redder than a goddamn tomato, because of the limited colors available. But in this case, they're really well suited to the game. The limited graphics means that there's a fair bit left to the imagination when exploring any given environment or scene, which allows the great descriptions, uncovered by the player through the look feature, to swoop in to fill in the blanks. These descriptions, with the way they provide context and backstory, only help to let the player get further entrenched in their confines, doing so in a way that a purely visual representation would likely be unable to. There's enough detail that it's enjoyable to take in, but not so much that it steals from the other equally important aspects. A lot of times when a game utilizes such a blatant homage to an inspiration, it goes too far, becoming part of the game's personality or purpose. Think of titles like Knights of Pen and Paper or Evoland, which, while fun, are so over the top and incessantly referential to the classics that inspired them that they're hard to appreciate on their own merit. That isn't the case with the Telwynium. It sincerely manages to use this graphical style for its own purposes, to enhance its atmosphere and better convey its themes. In that respect, it gets the best of both worlds with the inherent recognizability of what it's paying tribute to, and the aforementioned mechanical dividends the entire game receives in the process. And those dividends come to roost with respect to just how much world building is crammed into the few short hours of gameplay. Vivid, in-depth explanations of the magical systems and the histories of the locations you're thrust into, predominantly revealed through the conversations you have with your companions. A lot of times, adventure game dialogue can get a bit monotonous. You almost feel obligated to comb through every option on the chance that something important might be revealed. Here, you want to exhaust every option. Characters have interesting and nuanced personalities that set them apart from each other, making what they might say all the more valuable. It makes you want to see everything they have to say in order to continue painting the picture of the world around you. Of course, it helps that these descriptions and conversations are fun to read, but that they do so much for the overarching tone makes them that much better. That picture is one crafted to portray traditional fantasy elements. It's rooted firmly in the themes of fairy tales and fables. Despite the magical aspects of its world building, I don't think you could call this a high fantasy setting. Characters aren't chucking fireballs at each other at a moment's notice or levitating around for the fun of it, leaving everything sort of down to earth. Even as the more fantastical elements rear their head, such as the natural constructs that are the Goblin, or the various unique races, they're still bound by the rules. This, unsurprisingly, works well with the fact that Pendar is pretty much just a guy. He fits in incredibly well with the world around him, even as it starts to get revealed that he might, be a bit more than just a guy. Like I said, the footage for this video has done a fine job spoiling things, so I won't pile on. But the way that the story doesn't shy away from unsettling and uncomfortable realities, which you often have to carry out through the gameplay, will put a pit in your stomach like nothing else. It relishes in making you face what you're forced to do, is quick to pull the rug out from under you, and leaves you feeling as if you've accomplished nothing, and oftentimes only made things worse through your actions, noble as they may be. It's awesome, if that wasn't already clear. That the gameplay doesn't step on your toes means you're free to take this all in, to get lost in the wealth of intrigue it has to offer. At the end of the day, isn't that what any adventure game worth its salt is trying to do? And if that wasn't enough for you, it even gets all the little details right. You can choose to emulate the video output in different ways, such as to make the game look like it's being played on an old CRT, or through pretty much any other lens you could imagine and or want. I love this stuff, even if I really couldn't find a use for it in this video. Honestly, other games should take note. This is, as far as I'm concerned, a masterclass in immersion and world building. It's proof that you don't need hundreds of hours to draw players in and get them invested. You need a concept, story, and systems that all work together. And the Telwynium has that in spades, and utilizes each of them to make for a thoroughly engaging and worthwhile few hours. I only have one incredibly specific point of contention with this game. There is a moment in the second chapter where you have to go pixel hunting, and it's pretty egregious in my opinion. It's not that I didn't know what to do. What the game asks for is pretty obvious, but I could not, for the life of me, figure out where to physically click to make what I knew would happen actually take place. That is some sort of frustrating, believe me. It's the only instance where I had to make use of the walkthrough, and with how cohesive everything else is as a whole, it was a decidedly jarring and unfortunate moment. Additionally, I did come across a few very minor spelling and grammatical errors in both the descriptions and dialogue, probably owed to the short time frames in which these games were made. I also wouldn't have minded a bit more sound, especially music overall. It uses music more as stingers, playing off motifs in order to accentuate suspense and tension at individual moments, and does so masterfully, I might add. But that means there are large stretches where there really isn't much sound at all. I understand that emptiness is very reminiscent of the games its appearance is based off of, but something ambient to fill in the gaps between those stingers would be nice. Honestly though, the former is easily fixed, and the latter is a matter of opinion. They aren't issues that detract from the experience in any meaningful way. The Telwynium is something special. I would love to see the chapters packaged together and officially released once the saga is complete. If you're a fan of adventure games, and hell, even if you're not, this isn't a title that should be missed. Take a night, pour yourself a drink, and see if you can stop yourself from playing through it all in one sitting. I'll bet that you won't be able to. Oh, and did I forget to mention that it's free? Yeah, so now you've got even less reason not to give it a shot.